Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. As you all are probably aware, tomorrow we have the EU referendum, and most of you, or all of you, hopefully will be voting, and we all have the opportunity to make a major difference in our country. Today we are very fortunate to have two guests who will be debating in front of us all, sharing their points and their points of view on why they think we should remain in the EU or we should leave the EU. On one side, debating to remain in the EU, we have Matteo Bergamini, who's heavily involved in politics and journalism. He worked in Salzburg, Austria, at the Salzburg Global Seminar, and he completed his undergrad in politics and history at Brunel in 2014. On the other side, we have Andrew Retta, who's an ex-Conservative councillor who's been a strong advocate to leave the EU. Let's welcome them with a big round of applause. Okay, the way that the format of this is going to work is they're going to be standing here looking at each other and the audience, and we're going to have 2 minutes to start off with each. Then we'll start giving them the opportunity to freeload a bit.
Did you say seconds out?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you when there's like 30 seconds left. And after that, any thoughts coming across, we will take them in between the two, and we'll finally end with 2 minutes closing from each. So, without further ado, please feel free to start, Matteo.
Okay.
Why should we remain in the EU?
This is on? Yeah, no, fantastic. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure debating in front of you all. And just to kick off the debate, because obviously the referendum is tomorrow, and one of the things I have to say is that the way that the in and out camp have been, well, the official in and out camp have been going about this debate has been, frankly, quite horrendous. I don't know if my colleague will agree on this. But it's been constant, sort of very negative, very sort of fear-orientated. If we leave, it's going to be hell. If we stay, it's going to be hell. You know, there hasn't been much actual discussion or actual proper debate around it, which is unfortunate and sad, because it's probably the biggest decision Britain's going to take this year and probably in the last 10 years. It is going to affect us massively whether we stay in or out. For me personally, I'm not part of any of the campaigns, but for me personally, I'm voting in tomorrow. Why I'm voting in tomorrow is several reasons. One, political. Since the creation of what was then called the EC and now the European Union, there hasn't been a single war in the European Union, in Europe. Europe has wretched itself full of wars, it has divided itself, it has created huge amounts of conflict. Since the creation of the European Union, that has created unity, stability and strength. Another side of things is economics. You know, you've got people like Richard Branson, for example, coming out pro-EU. You've got people like the economist that predicted the 2008 financial crash coming out pro-EU, Dr. Doom, as some of you may remember him. 1 in 10 jobs are reliant on the European Union. Huge amounts of our trade goes through the European Union. So if we leave, essentially all we'd have to be doing is dealing with the European Union, but rather having a seat at the table where we actually have a voice, where we actually can speak and debate and decide on what the European Union does. All we'd essentially be doing is stepping away and saying, right, I'm not going to have any of those decisions, but we're still going to have to deal with them anyway. Also, not forgetting that we are now in a very much a changing world, where you've got countries like Russia, you've got countries like China, you've got countries like India, massive economic blocs that are coming up in the world and influencing massively the way geopolitics is run. We, as a European Union bloc, actually have clout when we negotiate with these countries. If we left, Lord knows what would happen. We're a small country. Yes, we were great once, but ideally, do we really have that clout to actually start debating and so forth again and start negotiating those treaties again? As the European Union, we have a much stronger, much easier say. Thank you. Is that?
Yes,
yeah?
thank you. Thank you very much. 2 minutes, please go.
First of all, I've got to work out how to turn this on.
Here we go.
Well, hopefully it's on. Good evening, my name's Andrew. And I will agree wholeheartedly, this campaign has been one of the worst campaigns I've ever been in. The smears, disingenuous remarks to each camp has been appalling. And you, the people, have not got the facts, and that's what you really want to make a decision. And tomorrow, whichever way you go, please go out and vote. That is the most important. That's democracy, and that's it working. Now, I come from a background of having voted in the last referendum, believe it or not. And I was a young European. It was my first vote. And I voted to go into a common market of independent nations, serving each one together in a trading bloc for prosperity and peace for us all. Somewhere in that 40 odd years, it has been overrun by people who no longer want to serve us, the people, but serve their own self-interests. So I'm going to ask you all a simple question. It's economics. So if I said to every single one of you, give me £35 every single day until I say stop, what are you going to say? No. But that's what we do every single week to the European Union. We give them 350 million. Now, I'm going to say to you, I'll give you back £10 of that £35. You're going to be happy with that? No, of course you're not. I'm also going to turn around and say to you, with that £10, I'm going to say to you, I'm going to put conditions on it. And if you don't fulfil those conditions, I'm going to fine you. So I'm going to take £1 away from that 10. Oh, by the way, if I say invest it, and you invest it and you make more money, I fine you once again. Last year, we had a GDP increase of 2% and we got fined 1.8 billion. Where did that money go? My time's up. But most important, vote tomorrow.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is explore some of these issues in a bit more detail. One of the core issues that matters, and both groups have
3 minutes, by the way.
Two.
And then you changed it to 2.
I did. What we're going to talk about now is focus on a very important issue, which is the economy, which both sides have talked about. So on the economy, many points were mentioned by Andrew. Isn't that something that we need to worry about? A lot of money is going out, and how much money is coming back in? In reality, wouldn't it be better if we got to choose where we spent our money rather than the EU?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of this issue about throwing around how much money we actually give to the European Union and how much of it we get back. And my colleague was talking about facts. And let's not forget that, yes, we do give money to the European Union. We also get a rebate from the European Union for some of that money. We also get huge amounts of investment from the European Union in regards to that money. So think of, for example, the higher education sector. Universities get huge amounts in regards to grant funding from the European Union. A lot of poor and impoverished parts of Great Britain get a lot of money from the European Union to support projects in those areas. So it's easy to turn around and say, well, look at this lump sum that we're giving, but it's also very easy to ignore everything else we're getting out of it. So on that point, I mean, yes, it's easy to say, oh, well, we're giving all this money, it's a membership thing, but what about the benefits? And the Out campaign don't really mention those benefits. The idea that actually, we are part of that market. We do have huge amounts of investment in our further education, universities and so forth, who would suffer massively if we left the European Union, for instance. Or poorer areas in the UK, which benefit hugely from these grant fundings.
Thank you very much. And let me ask you a response.
Can I just respond to that one, because this is supposed to be a debate?
Of course,
okay.
yes.
Actually, I mentioned that. I said to you, give me £35. And I said to you, I'm going to give you £10 back. That's the investment. That's what we're talking about. We're giving £35 million.
You haven't mentioned about what benefits you are giving us.
Okay, hold on. But I've told you that £10 of that, or 100 million of that 350 million that we spend out every single week is coming back. Yes, it's being invested, but we have to adhere to what the European Union does. And then every single time we do an infrastructure renewal, we have to put a sign up that turns around and says, not only did we pay for it, because actually that money is not the EU's money. It's like government money. It's not their money. It happens to be your money, my money, your money. It's taxpayers' money. And we have no say on how that is spent without them telling us. And if we don't sign up to it, they fine us. Last year, we were fined £770 million for not adhering with EU subsidies. That comes out of that 350 million, or that £10 rebate that I keep on telling you. Pure economics. By the way, I am an accountant, an economist, and I come from a background of finance.
Okay, great. What I'm going to do is ask, as I asked him a question, I'll ask you one. What about, a lot of people are saying all of these big economic bodies, whereas the IMF or other bodies have been saying that it is very bad for the economy for us to leave. Are all these experts wrong?
I wouldn't put them as wrong, no, but an awful lot of them, for example, George Osborne asked Her Majesty's Treasury to bring out a budget that extrapolated 14 years and said we're all going to be £4,300 worse off in 14 years' time. Told you I'm an accountant. I make budgets and make forecasts, and I do 3 and 5 years. I never go 14 years because there's too many variables. There's too many imponderables inside that. And that's what we need to look at. What they didn't do is didn't ask the simple question, if we were outside and we were trading through the World Trade Organization, what would that do? Would our trade increase? Today, the Commerce Bank and the Deutsche Bank of Germany have both said that business in Germany will still trade with Britain. I don't see the boss of BMW or Mercedes turning around and saying, I'm not going to send cars to Britain. Who's saying it are the politicians who've got a vested interest. The establishment elite of Europe who've lined their own pockets for years at our expense.
Thank you very much. Any response?
Yeah, no, just to respond to that. So first of all, in regards to you being an economist, for example, or an accountant rather, you know...
Almost the same.
Getting there. But the guy that predicted the 2008 financial crash, for example, the guy that was nicknamed Dr. Doom, he is very much an economist, knows about this stuff, and he essentially is pro-in. Partly because of those issues that, you know, if we leave the European Union, because one of the things that is constantly being missed out is that, yes, I mean, you can talk about the finances, and if you just talk about the rebate, of course it looks different. But if you start to mention all of the actual benefits of a membership to the European Union, so for instance, being part of a trading bloc that has a lot more clout, unified, to actually be able to debate certain treaties. I mean, you know, it's this equivalent of going to the council, for instance, just one of you and demanding something, and then 1,000 people going to Harrow Council and demanding the same thing. Who do you think they would listen to? Of course the 1,000 people, simply because there is more voice and you have more clout unified. And that's the important thing about the European Union.
Thank you very much. Okay, what we're going to do is, because we have a short amount of time, we're going to move to another topic, if that's okay. Let's talk about the other hot topic, immigration. Who wants to go first?
I don't mind.
Okay, there you go. Oh, when it comes to immigration, one of the big challenges that many people are talking about is the fact that on the one side we have many parties which have been very hostile to immigration joining the Leave campaign, and that's a real challenge because you have these big posters that have been described as racist and xenophobic, and that is the fear from many people within communities that that's what Leave's all about. What do you think about that?
When we started this discussion, we both turned around and said there have been things that have gone on which are absolutely appalling, disingenuous to certain sections of our society, and not acceptable to people who have grown up in this country with all communities. I'm an East End kid, so you can imagine what it was like when I was growing up. Next door to me was a lady who came off the Windrush. Some of the older gentlemen here might remember what Windrush was, but it was the West Indian boats that came over in the 1950s. So I found that unacceptable, and I do find it unacceptable. We are a tolerant nation, a cohesive nation, and a nation that accepts people and should always continue to accept people. Now, what we are turning around and saying in the Leave campaign is that we want to control our borders. We want to have a new system brought in, a system that is based on the Canadian or the Australian, a match of the two. And it's a points-based system. And that system would bring the best talents into this country, people who are going to contribute to this country, not someone who is not going to contribute to our country, but is able to because of free movement throughout Europe. It's a difference, but it will, and I don't think it will stop immigration, and it won't control immigration. But what it will do is bring talent, it will bring people that will give something to our nation, just as the people who go through Canada and Australia do this present moment.
Thank you very much. From your side, you have a chance to respond and answer this question as well. But what do you think about the fact that, in reality, by having the EU, we're not able to have immigration from other parts of the world? Isn't that a challenge, that we have unlimited immigration from the EU and we have, as a result, limited immigration from the rest of the world? Should we not have it based on what's good for our country?
I mean, if you phrase it like that, yes, of course we should have what's best for our country, but then it depends on what you think is best. I mean, you know, you can't stand here and say that the EU is perfect. It's not. It has its issues. It has its problems. But for me, it's better to stay in and essentially try and fix these issues with our other partners in Europe than essentially leaving, putting up our hands and washing our hands of it. I personally agree with the free movement of labour because it's essentially moving forward. You know, you're allowing young people, or people in general, that want to work somewhere else, the right to do so. Like, for example, the many English migrants that are living in Spain, for example. So it's interesting for example, the Leave camp to say, well, you know, we need to control our borders, we need to control immigration, but it's a two-way street. So essentially, you'd be stopping yourself from going to live or work somewhere else as well, if you wanted to. So for me, it'll be essentially a step backwards, putting up borders again and putting up tariffs like Australia does. I mean, they're in a completely different situation. They're in a completely different environment, in a completely different part of the world. We aren't in that situation. We're in a place where there is a community. And to be honest, I mean, if you look at the way the media and, like my colleague said, the way that both campaigns have been dealing with immigration, it's been absolutely dreadful. But the reality is that there hasn't been this huge influx of British migrants that, for example, the Daily Mail claimed. A lot of European workers that come over to Britain do work, do contribute to society, despite what the media say.
Thank you very much. We're now going to have 1.5 minutes closing from both sides, and then we can close. Thank you very much.
Well, you went first.
Yes, go for it.
First of all, thank you very, very much again for allowing us to come along and talk to you. And I think that's what we've needed, a conversation, and a proper conversation. What we haven't had is fact. On the 24th, I don't think any of us really know what it's going to be like. That's going to be honest. I think all of us have got to say that. If we vote to leave, then we have an opportunity. We bring our sovereignty back. We have a chance to control our borders. We have a chance to enhance our economy. But what is important as well is that Britain has stood up for everyone in Europe. My business works in Europe. Bulgaria, Italy, Germany, France, Latvia. All my colleagues say exactly the same thing. They're really quite jealous of us in this country. We have an opportunity not only for the Great Britain, but for Europe as well. There are so many things that are wrong with it. And if we stand up, and if we are resolute, and if we are strong, we can change Europe. And may I just say one thing? Claude Juncker came out today and told this country that the deal that David Cameron got, which was no deal at all, is non-negotiable. There's nothing more. I've heard people say we need to renegotiate. We can't. So tomorrow, I urge that you go out, you vote leave for a stronger, a safer, a better off Britain, and eventually a Europe that is strong, safe, united, and better off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for listening.
So just to sort of reiterate the beginning of my colleague there, I mean, yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. It's been an honour. And yeah, it is true, you know, we have no idea what will happen if we do go for a Brexit. You know, because it's something that no country's ever attempted. No country's ever attempted to leave the European Union, so we don't know. That is something that everybody has to accept and has to deal with. However, the idea of leaving the European Union to then make a stronger Europe doesn't essentially compute, because you're essentially splitting up what is a strong economic trading bloc. So for me, if I was to say something to you guys for tomorrow, to vote tomorrow, I would just vote in. Why? Because one, it's a move to integrate and make sure that Europe, as a continent, as a bloc, has a chance to actually trade and be part of something larger than itself. You You know, Britain wrote most of what's in the European Union. You know, we essentially led the Human Rights Charter to be created. We were one of the founding countries essentially to create what is now the European Union. We led it, and we can play a massive part in the European Union. It is one of the biggest economic blocs in the world, and leaving that, for me, would be the wrong move and leave us isolated and alone.
With that, hopefully all of you will have the chance to vote tomorrow in one of the biggest choices that we will have to make in our generation. Please do vote, and thank you again, once again, to both participants in this debate. Thank you very much. There is time.